Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We got Sean here, we got Seb here, we got Nick here. I am stoked for this one. Now, while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Do the things like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you haven't yet, make sure you're signed up for the Reinforcement Loop, the newsletter that goes out every week, talking about what we talked about, getting a deeper dive, as well as some of Sean's thoughts. Get that, stay in the loop. Other than that, we're going to be talking about paradigms of success today. And I'm interested to see where this goes because I've had this in my phone for a little while as a topic, and I am stoked for this one. So let's get some intros one more time. Nick, hit us up, 10 to 15 seconds. Where you come from, all that good stuff.
I'm Nick Fleber. I'm a professional MMA fighter, former 3 RCR and 3 PPCLI.
Bam, I like it. Seb, how's the foothills treating you?
Same as the last 300 time that I was here, sunny and warm, amazing. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good right now. Everything's turning green.
Sweet.
I like it. Green and gold, my favorite combo.
Those are the, I think some of the best times down there is early spring when all the green starts to come out. It is fantastic. Sean, how's life treating you in the mountains?
Could be better. I could be on a functioning laptop instead of my phone and a janky audio feed. So my apologies to everyone.
Boom. I like it. Well, let's get right into it. Paradigms of success. I wrote this down on my phone because I had this thought of not only what does success mean to everybody, because we all have our own kind of definitions to it, but how we build that idea of success, like the little pyramid of concepts that we've put together that get to a point that goes, oh, here's what success looks like. And so I wanted to get your guys' first thoughts. Let's start with Sean today. What do you think?
Well, my thoughts are similar to my thoughts over the last couple of decades. That I feel success to some degree is misdefined or ill-defined or improperly defined by our modern society. I think that many people have been misled as to what success means. And, I'm not going to relay all of that now. That's just my opening thoughts, and we'll see where things go in the podcast.
I like it. Seb, what are you thinking?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is probably, mental framework. What do you have to align your actions with your values, so to speak, in a predefined goal of whatever importance or the importance that you assign to it or society assigns to it or because those are all factors that are going to contribute to some of the establishment of those quote unquote success parameters. So it's a really interesting thing, and it's also not really anchored in concrete necessarily, and it probably shouldn't be. It has to be a little bit flexible, and you have to have the ability to reassess, gain new perspective, and sort of aim differently, and also not move the aim point consistently. So there's a fine balance there. Anyways, I'm sure we'll get into all this.
I'm liking this. Nick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, just touching on what Seb said, basically, it's for when I think about like the paradigm of success, I think of it in the sense, we have different categories, I guess, in our lives of everyone's situation is going to be different when it comes to their idea of success. Some people's idea of it, like success might, it might be as simple as I don't have to check my bank account when I fill up my truck, right? Versus if I don't have this Louis Vuitton bag, a Rolls Royce, and this, I'm not successful, right? So I think it's an interesting topic, and I think there's a lot of different avenues around it. So it should be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm digging this. I want to touch on what Seb said first here because it clicked into my head was the idea of being able to kind of move your goalposts, but also not too quickly so that you actually understand you can reach success and then move it. Because I want to give this as an example. Maybe it's something we can play with in the as a analogy, but when I joined the military, that was the goal, was to get to the unit, to go to Afghanistan, to go do the thing. After that, I didn't know how to move the goalpost. I just kind of sat there, was like, okay, well, I've achieved the thing, I've done the thing, now what do I do? And I spent a couple of years within the military, still doing the work and doing the job, but without really any future goalpost in mind. It was just kind of there. I had succeeded in what I wanted to do. So I want to touch on that a little bit and give me you guys' thoughts on finding that balance. Seb, we'll come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, this specific example needs a powerful set of reframes, right? And the reason why that is because the goal and the ultimate goal is so hard to emulate. You know, you're going to engage in the most intense experience of the human experience, arguably, really, combat, you know. And so now what? You know, how do I realign things, and how do I get fired up about anything else? And I think that's a trap that a lot of veterans fall into, unfortunately. And so the thought that something that's lesser in intensity automatically has no value in relation to something that is really high in intensity is a flawed concept. It isn't the case. It's just a matter of figuring out what that looks like and how you can bring the experience and the things that you've gained through the first crucible, which was, you know, your combat experience, or the things that were very intense, and how can you now use the tools acquired through this crucible and pass them on to the next set of endeavors, even if they're not nearly as perceived to be as nearly as intense. Can't speak.
And I totally agree with that. It's something I had to learn over time to get there. Do you think, because you said it's a trap a lot of veterans fall into, and I want to ask specifically about the police and fighters as well, because I think about like people that will climb Mount Everest, and then, okay, well now what? You know, you reach that pinnacle, the literal pinnacle, and was talking to my psychologist about this one point in time, and she was describing something called summit depression.
Mm-hmm.
So like once you reach the top, and then you got to climb down, and that's where most people either fall or have accidents or die, is in that descent portion.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk a little bit about the police, Seb, and then we'll go around the table?
Yeah, I mean, this would be the consolidation phase of any operations, right? Where things go sideways because you've all of a sudden written off the outcome and you're good to go, and you can drop focus and do all the things. And so the descent is, if not the most critical piece of that ascent, really, because you're going to be exhausted. You're going to have the adrenaline dump from the summit and do all the things, and you're probably going to be short on gear. So you have to be a little bit more careful. Now, in the police world, what I have seen and what I have observed ties right into the concept of self-definition, right? Where people essentially let something, even if it's a very specific event, define who they are, and that becomes the sort of the epicenter of everything they stand for. And they will often, if there's a bit of an emptiness there, if there's a bit of a lack of depth, they might actually use that as a propping sort of mechanism, you know, for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, by engaging, you know, everybody and their dog in the fact that they climbed Everest, for example, you know. And that was the pinnacle of their life experience on this planet. And so this is a sort of a self-reinforcing mechanism that keeps on repeating to yourself that was the pinnacle of your life, and now you're making it so. And so it's easy to sort of follow that up.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's the high school football guy, right? That was my I peaked in high school. Nick, you got any thoughts from the fight world?
Yep. The entire metaphor of that climbing the mountain to your goal, right? And then it's coming down the other side. So, for instance, like, and I see this a lot, especially with other, like, especially the pros. Almost every time you have a fight, whether you win or lose, you get a severe depression after the fight, right? Because you do all this work, and you know, you're doing your daily things, right? Climbing that mountain hour by hour. Then you get to the fight and you're at the peak, right? And that's like, you just conquered it. You get your hand raised. I don't know what it is, but it just, as soon as you have that glory and that moment, even right away after the fight, I'd say as soon as the adrenaline dump goes, you usually don't sleep the night after your fight. You're usually just laying in bed, just vibrating, right? Just because your nervous system is just hot, like whack. Um, I it's really hard to come out of that mindset, and it takes a great deal of discipline, especially after a fight, if you're not injured, to immediately hop back into the gym and just continue on. I see a lot of fighters, they'll take like weeks off or months off, and then they come back and they go into camp, but they're not working on their skill set in between. So for me, the fight is one thing, but the next step for me is always fighting myself to get right back in the gym to make sure I'm working on my skill set versus just focusing on a fight, because the real growth doesn't happen in the actual fight camp. It actually happens in that time of peace where you're just like you're eating good, training good, your brain's good, everything's good. That's where you level up. But it's applicable to life too, right? If you're going to climb a mountain, you can't just go climb a mountain. You need to go on a stairmaster and start working. You need to start drinking water. You need to eat healthy. You can't just conquer massive things like that, right? So I think it's a great metaphor, especially around that when it comes to the fight world.
Yeah, I love it. Sean, what about yourself in the race world or in the tier 1 world? What do you think?
Yeah, I've seen it happen to lots of people for sure. It's happened to myself. I've fell victim to it as well. Given that I'm in my 10th career, I suppose, 10 iterations of being able to observe myself in this moment of, okay, I've reached a certain level of peakness. Now what? Who am I now? Who am I going to be next? What was I? These are great questions to ask as you move through life. They're difficult questions to answer, though, if you've only led one life. And I think that's where it gets interesting for every individual. As an example, we all kind of started off our young lives in the military. And that first career, to some degree, shaped us. But then at that young age, probably, I don't think, I certainly didn't, and I'll speak for all of us, I don't think any of us at that point, when we were moving into our second careers or second phase of life, as it were, transitioning out of the military, we ever took a long period of time to deeply reflect through many conversations with much older and wiser people who had learned these lessons in order to construct our own framework of how to do this next phase right. I didn't do it. I don't know anyone who did it. And if someone on the panel did that, I'd love to hear how it worked out, because I've never really talked to a veteran who has nailed that piece back then. Now, in our modern world, I think that veterans are encouraged, are prompted. The conversation is certainly starting to happen on how to do this better, but it wasn't a thing back then. And so learning through the school of hard knocks of transitioning to that next phase, I think is kind of valuable. I think it's kind of good to like pick up a few scars along the way as you're trying to figure yourself out in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. These scars are the things that define us. Otherwise, it's a vanilla lifestyle that has very little bearing on the world around us. And so I do feel that a transition can be done better. It can be done smoother, but I don't think it should be like pablum smooth. I don't think it should be perfectly transitioning, because then the lessons that happen in that transition are missed. And there's some real gold in those transitions, at least through the transitions that I've been through. I've learned a ton about myself and the world around me. So even if it's difficult, there's gold in the difficulty. But maybe we'll talk about the transition process a little bit as the conversation unfolds.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the fact that we have a really almost consistent background, especially at the very beginning of our lives. But I'm wondering how much our upbringing kind of focuses our concept of success at the moment. Because I'm thinking, like, Seb, you've told a story before when you were a kid, you had, like, you were laser focused on what you wanted to do, and then you did it, and you did it for years. And then comes the next phase. I mean, Nick, you said you wanted to be a fighter. Like, you went and did that. Same thing with you, Sean. I mean, we've all had that kind of similar background, but or the same mental concept, but all of our backgrounds are very different. So I'm wondering if you guys perhaps think there's anything shared about our backstories, about how we saw ourselves to begin with, or perhaps maybe it's a Canadian culture thing. What do you think? I'm going to come to Nick on this one. What do you think?
I think, well, when it comes to like the topic of all of us having like that similar like path and journey, I think that we all understood the concept that we wanted to experience like something hard and difficult and challenge ourselves. I think if you're willing to put yourself in those like hard positions more often than not, just kind of like what Sean was saying, but you're gonna get more growth developing scars than anything else in life. And I also think that when you get those scars, right, it shifts your idea of what is actually success and what's not. One, like for me, when I was like, I'm going to be a fighter since I was 17, that was every day. That's what I was going to be. I joined the military, went through that training, and I understood that that training was going to level me up, especially mentally when it came to fighting, when it came to myself, and I wanted to experience that suffering. When I came out of the military, like Sean was saying, I went from one day being a soldier on a Monday to the Tuesday morning, I was a high-risk youth worker working with troubled kids in Edmonton. And it's funny, right? Every avenue we go in life has its own ability to leave scars, but you don't always appreciate what you're about to get yourself into until you're in it. But when you come out the other side, yeah, it might have left quite a bit of damage, but you're always going to be able to reflect back and say, like, almost be grateful for it, because it severely alters your mindset and gives you so much growth that you're not going to experience anywhere else in life. And you're going to look at the world differently, and that's okay. But it's, I forget what exactly he said, but Volkanovsky said, I think it was like suffering is a luxury or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Suffering is a luxury.
I love it. I love it. Seb, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's a really powerful reframe. I just love when Vokes talks about mental health or anything, actually, because he's actually very deep in that. So if you never had a chance to watch him talk about this, it's actually very insightful. Friction is what we're talking about, right? And just think about anything you've accomplished in life that was super easy, and I will argue that the reward on that achievement was much lesser, and you probably took a lot more for granted, and the gratitude associated with the completion of said task is nowhere near what it was when you gutted something out, and really made it happen and sort of hard earned it, so to speak. And so it's to go back to what Sean was saying earlier, and this is a thing, and this is to a certain extent what we've done as a generation with some other generation, like we knew what it took for us to become the adults that we became. And then we said, I don't want any of the hardship that I experienced to be on my kids. And so therefore I'm going to remove it all. And that's going to certainly work well for us. And an entire generation is completely lost as a result of that. And I think that's an oversimplification. Friction is required. We know at the very least it builds resilience in a variety of different realm, but also it teaches you something about yourself. And every time you engage in something that's extremely difficult, you're going to learn something about yourself, and you're going to learn your capacity and where your boundaries are, and where you need some work, and all of the things, essentially exposing some of the shortcomings you might have in relation to negotiating life. And I think that friction is critical. So even if we facilitate the process and we get all the information on paper from a sort of knowledge standpoint, from a technical standpoint, there still should be friction for humans to grow from whatever change they're going to embark into. There's something else.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's something else I just wanted to comment on, sort of what you were talking about, Chance. If you go to the bank, if you're in a gym full of MMA guys, or if you're in a jiu-jitsu gym or whatever martial arts you're into, boxing, whatever, and you're looking for fighters that can fight, you're going to see them everywhere. If you go to the bank and you look for fighters that can fight, you're not going to see them everywhere. So context matters, right? So it's less about how come there's four of us here with the similar backgrounds. Like, we're essentially in an aquarium where fish get along. We've taken each one of us, and the fact that we have similar backgrounds is simply who we sort of tend to gravitate towards, right? So it's a bit of it's not a baseline in the accurate sense, or even in the academic sense, because it's so skewed, right? Like it's such a skewed proportion compared to what it would be like if we were outside. But I think that's generally what happens. Like-minded individuals will find themselves together, and again, that sort of reinforces the fact that if you are a certain way and you're surrounded by negative energy, or you're surrounded by people that are constantly involved in drama, or whatever the case may be, you can expect the end result to be exactly what you are into, right? And so I think that's a conversation that's worth having for sure.
I like it. Sean, what are you thinking? I got some ideas, but I want to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, just two things. Playing directly off of what the guys have just been talking about, this tension, this friction, this uncomfortableness of things is, of course, critical. But I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to play a game within a game as well. So just before we started this podcast, Seb and I were in a Zoom meeting, and we were discussing the book that we're creating together. And, there's some serious discussion going on, but there's also some lighthearted moments as well, as we're chatting back and forth. But to my point, at one point in the conversation, we both agreed that this has been no easy journey. It has not been an easy process to get the book to where it is right now. And I said, and Seb could have easily have said it just before me, that I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, if this book was easy to write, it has no bearing in my life. Anything that is notable in my life has been bonkers, has been freaking hard. Anything that has left a mark, that has stung really bad, that's the stuff that counts in my world, in my life, as I look backwards. I don't remember the easy days. I really don't. I remember the hard days, but I don't remember them as hard as, I don't remember the pain. I don't remember the suffering. I can't recreate the pain. No human can. And I'll challenge anyone to that. No matter how bad your injuries or moments were where you absorbed a ton of pain, you can't recreate that right now. All you have is the memory of, it was really painful, or I suffered a lot, but you can't re-feel that pain and suffering. But it's the notable stings in life that I appreciate, that are milestones in my life. So this book, when it's done, it won't be the book that makes me feel like that was a small success. It will be the freaking struggle that makes me feel like it was a success. Because if something is super duper hard in my life and I manage to get it to a finish line with just a solo journey or as part of a team, if it was bonkers hard and we make it happen, I'm good. I call that success. And so the discussion that Seb and I were having easily illustrates to me that anything hard in life is worth pursuing as a metric towards success. That's the things that you will remember. Now, speaking of friction and tension, just shortly after we said that, Seb said, well, we should wrap it up because we've got a podcast coming up. And I said, what? What podcast? This podcast that I wasn't aware of. So the tiny little frictions in life, the little tensions in life that show up like as little microcosm moments, they're also important. Like when Seb introduced that idea of, oh, we're in a podcast, I just thought of all the things that I had to do and knew that I was going to make them all happen, but it wasn't going to be easy to make them happen. But I love that, man, the little tensions throughout the day. If my day is going seamless, the day disappears as almost unremarkable. I need remarkable days in my life to feel like I've accomplished something that day. So there's two things that I was just considering as important. I'm wondering what you guys think about that stuff.
I'm glad I can be the friction in your life. That's all I gotta say. That is totally my bad. We were discussing this yesterday, and I was thinking about moving the show to today, and I just assumed that psychically you would know when I confirmed it with the other people that you would just know. So I'm happy to be the friction in your day. Just wanted to put that across.
You should be my wife.
Right. So the thought I had that I want to touch on here is I want to go back to this friction, but do you think that then success in and of itself is the friction, is being able to like ride that friction farther and farther every time you do it? And it reminded me of, the song, How Many Roads Must a Man Walk Down, right? This concept of how many times do we have to hit that friction? How many times do we need to stay in the heat, in the pain, in the suffering before we realize that that's actually the successful moments? What do you guys think? Seb, I'm going to come to you first. I saw you taking notes.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think that as humans, as we all know, comfort is our poison. It generally is. And it doesn't even matter if you're somebody that seeks hardship all the time, you will catch yourself sort of gravitating towards comfort if you give yourself the opportunity to do so. And so whether or not you're engaged in full-on friction or you're seeking the next friction, those are decisions. They're willful decisions, and they're willful decisions made in understanding that our visceral nature is to gravitate towards comfort and understand the detriment of having such a drug as a poison. And yeah, for me, it's just, and again, this always comes down to that conversation, because when you're talking to certain people, they will automatically discount whatever it is that you say in relation to discomfort if they feel that you have a propensity to seek discomfort for the sake of discomfort, right? Not understanding the underlying reason why you are doing it. And it's easy for them to then self-justify why they're not doing it, because you're just a different person, right? And that's an easy cop-out, and you can actually probably ride the wave until you're face to face with your mediocrity at some point later in life, realizing that you haven't pushed the boundaries, or even if you're not mediocre, that your life engagement was to a certain extent mediocre, and now you're looking back going, you can't get that time back ever. And so for me, it's not about the conversation shouldn't be about will this happen. The conversation should be about it does happen. That's inherent to human nature, and we just what do we have to do, and what do we implement as individuals to make sure that we keep ourselves in check. And I'm going to tell you, man, we've chased all kinds of things through life, all kinds of hard things, but I'm being challenged more by, each one of you on the daily than I ever was before. So even if I was pretty good at seeking the opportunities that would create that friction, there is nothing like having a group of savages that just seek friction all the time to elevate you. And I think we can all attest to this, right?
Absolutely. And Interestingly enough, I just thought of this in that you wanted to hunt next year from your house. We're going camping. We're going to make it. Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
I had a couple different avenues I wanted to go, but I'm running a blank right now.
Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah, come back to me.
All right, Sean, what do you got?
So interestingly enough, Chance, I believe you said how many roads does a man have to walk, or how many roads does a man have to go down, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
You only need one, and it's called your life. And the moment that you understand the way, the path, the road in front of you, well, there's one road now. Who you are inside. I just wrote about it just a couple of days ago on my Instagram feed about how I feel like I've stayed pretty true to the way, my way, the way that I felt was appropriate for Sean, who I am at my core. And so a long, long time ago, I had a definition of what I am or why I'm here, or a sense of purpose, if you will, a sense of identity. And so that feeling has stayed with me all my life. And I've tried to stay true to it. And it has taken me in directions that were absolutely unexpected, unanticipated. And quite frankly, some of them I didn't want. But the path inside of me, the way inside of me is only one way, the road in front of me that has taken me up and down and left and right, but it's only one road. I'm not jumping on different roads, different super highways without understanding who I am inside. And so a long time ago, I kind of accepted that, not accepted lazily, that, well, this is who I am and this is what I want. That's taken a lot of thought, a lot of hard work. It's not an easy thing to get right with what you feel is right. But I've tried to focus on that, and I've tried to pursue it like a freak, because I am curious as to what my way is, the way for me in this time that I'm in. And so every moment that I'm in a moment nowadays, I just try to be true to what I am, my way. And so there aren't many roads that a man has to walk, I feel. There's only one road a man has to walk. But along the way, you've got to keep your eyes open and be available to the ebbs and flows of that road, rather than jumping off the road when it's convenient and looking for a new road to jump on. I hope that makes sense.
I'm tracking it. I have a thought on this. Oh yeah, Nick, what do you got?
Yeah, so where I was wanting to go with what I was saying is we set a goal for ourselves. Like for me, I've identified as a fighter since I was 17. Everything I did in my life, I lived other paths, but the entirety of the path, the end goal, what I wanted to achieve, even when I was in the military, once I was done training, I wanted to be training for fights. But as all of us know in this group, it's very difficult to mix like a fight camp while you're also doing the things every day with the boys, because it's very contradictory in that realm. So for me, like when I got out, it was maintaining that. And I think systemically we all chase the same, I guess, energy, right? We're all accustomed to chaos. And for me, it's that finding comfortability in the chaos. And I can't remember who said it, but every time you make like a concisive choice to re-enter that mindset, like for me, and this comes back to what Seb was saying about comfort, right? Every time I come out of fight camp, I'm guilty of it. I miss pizza. I miss ice cream. I miss sleeping in. I miss all those things. and I usually binge it. And then I binge it for like 2 or 3 days and I'm like, the hell am I doing? And I do it almost every time, right? It's just, those are luxuries that we want. And but the thing is, as soon as you get caught in those luxuries and you're just like, no, this is how I want, I just want to live I want to live a happy life. I'd rather be fat and sassy than, a hard charging super soldier, right? You have to have that mindset to like keep pursuing that energy, right? And eventually, right, as we all know, like your timeline comes to an end of like how much you can pursue to that caliber, but like it's that consistency to pursue maybe not so much hardship, but something more intense, something that gives you that adrenaline rush, or that ability to go to bed at night, like, and say, that to me makes me feel like I've succeeded, right? And I feel like, and we all know it, I think like I'd probably say at least like 95% or more of our population, they live these generic basic lives where they don't come out of that comfort zone. They might get these little glimpses of it or whatever, but they're not living it. It's not their daily line, right?
This is interesting too, because I think I wrote down earlier here that perhaps friction is what burns away the other roads. So similar to what Sean's saying, similar to what you're saying, Nick and Seb, is that like we have a path that is ours, but we need the friction then within life. We need the challenges within life to burn away the other options, if that makes sense. It's just a postulation of mine, to a point that we can understand what our path is and then follow that. What do you guys think on that one? It's just a postulation of mine. Seb, I'm going to come to you first. Or it's killing me. Here you go.
Yeah, you're probably better to keep me small anyway. Nobody wants to see this big noggin. One thing I was thinking about when Sean was talking about the road concept is, so if I say to you, it's kind of like if I said to you, don't think about a boat, you just either thought of Titanic or a boat like Titanic, or that's the first thing that comes to mind. But one of the things that I think about when somebody says a road, for whatever reason, it's a long Southern Alberta highway with like these hills or whatever. But the fact is, eventually, just like any roads, it's going to lead to gravel, mud, the drink, unpaved section, cross sections. Like, I mean, there's a variety of different things that happen on a drive, on an intercontinental or a national drive. Like, say you go from one end of the country to the other end, you're gonna experience a wide range of things, and those things are all gonna take different skill sets to be maneuvering. The way you drive on the road, on a freshly paved road, and the way you drive on a road with yellow lines, recently painted, and the way you're gonna address corners on gravel are gonna be completely different. They're gonna be vastly different. And yeah, theoretically, you're all driving. It's all driving, but there's all kinds of different driving techniques and things that you're going to have, and intricacies that you're going to have to engage on that road. And so you are going to see diversity on that one road. I think the point that, from what I understood, the point that Sean was making is going from one aim point to another, doing all kinds of things in completely different realms, and just going nowhere because you don't stay on anything long enough to pressure test it and to build that friction to a point where your capacity is increased and you can start gaining momentum. And you can start, if you as you're about to gain momentum, if you switch road, it's all over again. You have to start, and you have to slowly get the wheels going until there is a certain amount of momentum that's built up. So that's kind of the analogy that in my brain was making sense when I look at a road. So again, another way to, I guess, synthesizing this is simply this: one road doesn't mean limited opportunities. One road is if you see it as a limited opportunity, then you are narrow-mindedly oversimplifying the process.
So I want to ask you guys a question about a term actually that made me think of. Do you guys ever have spinners in the Army? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Nick, No? You guys don't know what I'm talking about? So spinners are people that, you know, they can't make a decision when they're under stress. And so they start turning in directions and they start spinning. You can see them in the field and they don't really know where to go. So they just keep making these little circles. And when you were talking, Seb, it made me think of when people get lost, they start making huge, quick adjustments. Like, oh, I need to turn left here, and they'll just go. And then now they're down a road that they've never been down. And then, okay, I just need to get back. So they'll turn right. And then that's how people get lost, is when they start shifting their focus in hard maneuvers. At least that's what clicked in my mind. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, sure. I think in order to sort of shore up this conversation some more, I'm going to use Nick as an example and myself as an example. I could use Olive as an example, but since Nick brought it up, his transition out of the military directly into his next career in Edmonton, which was, I believe, high-risk youth.
Yep.
And so, as Nick stated, his transitionary phase was extremely short, as it was for me when I left JTF2, went straight to the Ontario Police College. I was wearing my Black Ninja outfit Friday at noon, and then Friday evening, there I was at Ontario Police College. And I had zero time to deal with that transition. And so, but when I left the Ontario Police College, my next transition was into computer system engineering. But I took a few months to let that happen because I wanted to see what showed up. And by showed up, I mean I wanted to just let life unfold in front of my nose, just in that next transition. And that's precisely what I did. And it showed up and I engaged in that. And that process taught me that I cannot afford to rapidly transition from one thing to another in a split second without that liminal space or that transitionary space of reflection. How do I feel about what I just went through? And what do I feel like engaging in next? Because the staying true to the way that I've tried to has caused me to just trust my instinct or trust my feelings or trust in life to lead me to where I'm supposed to go. And so that, for me, took a reflection phase to process what I've just come through in order to step into the next naturally unfolding organic moment that was put in front of me. And that's the way the rest of my life has gone. That's how this book is going. That's how all things go for me now. There's an initial period where I'm deep into something, and then something shows up, and I need just a bit of time. And that bit of time might be half a day. It might be a minute. It might be a month. Whatever the timeline is actually not that important. I just need time. Time to just feel what I feel and then execute. And so I think that, taking it back to the conversation of how it's difficult for veterans or law enforcement, first responders, or anybody who's hard charging in various careers, and I'm not going to keep it to sort of, traditional hard charging roles that we talk about on the show, which are great representations. It could be an industry executive. It could be a CEO, CFO, COO. It doesn't much matter. Any person who's being hard charging, I think that when you step out of it, irrespective of what human resources says or any department manager says, whatever direction they give, whatever paperwork they give you, whatever path they put in front of you, before you step into all of that paperwork and path, do a pause, a tactical pause, and just see what you see and feel what you feel, and don't follow the yellow umbrella down a road that doesn't belong to you. Let the path that is inside of you unfold organically in an appropriate time that you feel settles you. The cautionary note, of course, is not getting too comfortable in the reflective phase and starting to get satisfied by caviar every day. There has to be a time where you settle into what's next, and then you've got to start dialing up that friction dial again to get moving into that next moment.
I'm liking this. Seb, what do you got? You look like you got something.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on that train as it flies by here with Sean as the conductor. One word of caution, obviously, when it comes to what Sean was talking about, which is essentially the concept of intuition versus emotion and cognitive knowledge, right? If you are very intuitive and you also have the ability for critical analysis and understanding cognitive process, then your intuition is going to guide you in the right direction. I guess the point I'm making, the cautionary tale, is following emotions for the sake of following emotions. I feel like doing that, or I don't feel like doing that. Therefore, I'm going to be up and down and up and down and up and down. And this is not what Sean is referring to. What he is referring to is intuition. How do I feel about certain things, taking into consideration the rest of the factors, not just the emotions, but also how do I feel about it? Because that's an important question. If you know yourself to be incredibly intuitive, and that saved your bacon, 100 times before, if not 1,000, then you know that when it feels right, it is right. If you know that if it feels wrong, it's wrong. But you need to have those left and right of arc, so to speak, to understand that you operate within that realm. Because if you don't have that and all you are doing is feeling what you feel or not feeling like doing, it ain't going to work the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, you got any points on this?
Yeah, just kind of adding on to what Seb said. What I was thinking when he was talking was one thing I've experienced personally, especially in my fight career, is when you don't have the right people around you. You're not sitting at the table with the right people. You could be the best fighter in the world. You could be the best tier 1 operator in the world. You could be the best at anything. But if the people that you're associating with, the people that you're keeping around, don't see your goal, don't see what you want for success, and you don't see what they want, and there's not a mutual understanding, I find that's where that negative friction comes in. And despite everything that you do, I feel like, and I've seen it, and you see it a lot, even at the highest level with like fighters and just any career, right? You could be the best at something, and then you could be fighting a guy is worse than you, but all of his support and all of his backing is on his team, and he's fueled by that, then he's probably going to win. And one thing that I really have had to come to understand is, if my gut is telling me this isn't right, then something needs to change, right? And not so much listening to your brain or your heart anymore, just actually following that gut instinct of, is this correct for the direction I have of what I want to succeed in, or what I would define as my successful moment, right?
This is interesting because I like this. I want to play with the idea of a successful moment, because that's all we really have, right? When we do hard things, when we get to the tippy top of the spear, or whatever it is we want to get to, it's a moment. It's a single moment. And then the next challenge is already in front of us, because we have to either climb down the mountain, or we have to figure out how to integrate that into our lives, or we have to step down from a podium, whatever it is. Those moments, I guess, and I'm wondering, because you guys have all stood there before, did that feel like success to you? Was that like a pinnacle of success that you can then utilize through the rest of your lives? And I'm just wondering what that felt like for each of you. I'm going to come right back to you, Nick. What do you think?
This is a deep one for me. I think in my head, one of the most successful moments that I've had in my life was my first pro win in Ontario there. And at the end of that fight, I remember, standing there, I was covered in blood, shit, my eyes split wide open, right? My ears the size of an avocado. I'm in a lot of pain. And the adrenaline, as soon as the fight's over, it starts dipping and you start feeling those leg kicks. You start feeling the sore ribs. You start feeling everything. And when they called my name and raised my hand, I just fell to my knees because I was overwhelmed with that feeling of success. However, it didn't feel the way I had built it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as soon as that moment passed and I was out of the cage, they were stitching me up, shoving needles in my face, like just all the things. I was like questioning myself. I was like, is that what I'm going to define as success for the rest of my life? Is that? And it's a great feeling. I honestly don't think there's much of a better feeling in the world than having your hand raised, especially in that kind of setting. But when I got home, because like I was in Ontario, when I flew back to Calgary, and when I'm limping through the airport, people are like, "Did you get hit by a car?" Right? Like it looks like I got hit by a car. And I walk down the escalator and I come out to the baggage, and my mom's standing there with my dad and my dog. And as soon as I saw my mom and my dog and the tail wagging, that is when I actually felt that moment of glory where I actually succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for me, it's not the money. It's not any of that. It's that moment afterwards. And almost every fight, I can attest to almost every fight I've ever had, the first thing I do almost every single time is I find my mom and I go hug my mom. Because that is, by definition to me, the truest form of success is just feeling the love from someone that genuinely cares for you more than anything on earth. It's not the money. It's not the luxury cars. It's not the luxury houses. I don't want that. For me, it's conquering myself to show growth, to show my family, my friends, that no matter what gets thrown at you in life and what hardships you endeavor, it's that ability to keep grinding through it and still come out the other side, no matter what gets thrown at you. So like whether it be fucking a health issue, you lose someone, whatever it is, to come out the other side wholeheartedly still a better person than you were yesterday. And, I think we're all guilty of it. I've had conversations with all of you now. And, we all, when we were younger, were, I like to just call it the hot and horny hard chargers that don't really care about what people think and what damage we're doing and all that. But eventually you get to that point where that instant gratification isn't it. Those little serotonin boosts aren't it. It is that just overwhelming feeling of love. For me, that is what I define as my success.
I love it, man. Sean, what is your pinnacle of success?
Well, Nick was talking about what fuels him to some degree, or what allows him to understand that he's been successful in the moment. And it's not about the win or loss per se. It's about the recognition or the connection with his mom in that moment to just acknowledge what just happened and feel supported. I think that's what I'm hearing. And I think that that's such a common path for most of us. My fuel would be just not to let down the people around me, not to let down the team, not to let down my fire team partner, not to let down the brick that's about to go through the door. The small team that's about to go through the door. or whatever the case is, whoever I'm involved with in the moment, I just don't want to let them down. And if I know that we're all doing our best, we're all moving in the right direction, it all feels good, it's all right, that's when I feel success in the moment. And so the moments that I've stood on a podium are less memorable than the moments that I didn't stand on a podium. And it's because those moments where I didn't stand on a podium were just freaking bonkers hard, man. It just, whatever it was about the thing that, blew me off my bike, or whatever the case is in my life, these moments where not I failed, but I didn't succeed in the way that I thought I would, those are really memorable to me. But they are almost pale in comparison to if I don't perform for my team, for the people around me that support me. And so my personal wins or losses are one thing, but my team wins and team losses are an entirely different thing. And personally, I am fueled by the team aspect more so than I am the personal aspect.
I'm loving where this is going, Seb. What do you got?
Yeah, incredible points and incredible points rather. And it's cool to hear Nick talk about the relationship with mom. That's cool, man. That's the lions be lions. When you don't have to tell everybody how tough you are, you can have these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of it's incredibly liberating, especially men out there. If you're posturing and you're projecting an image of yourself that isn't true to form, then you feel you have to compensate all the time. So just be the person you want to be, and you'll be able to have all the conversations, the meaningful conversations you need to have with the right people at the right time. And this was a lesson in that kind of humility. So I appreciate that, Nick. One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking, when both you and Sean were talking, is I don't have a single moment. To be honest with you guys, I've never accomplished anything that was, of incredible significance, right? But one thing that I did do that I certainly held a lot of respect for the process and love for the process was becoming an ERT member. And that is because, as you alluded to earlier, at the age of 8, I was already fixated on doing that. And so by the time I graduated, when I was 30, mid 30s or whatever, when I graduated a very difficult and long course, there was no single moment, as you defined earlier, Chance, because I don't believe in that. There is a single moment made up of multiple micro moments, and those micro moments are individual moments into themselves at the time at which they're occurring. So now you're looking backwards saying, well, this is the one moment. It's like, well, yeah, it's a culmination of the micro moments that make it one moment. But it's an oversimplification to say this was just one moment, because we know it's not the case. And I know that's not what you meant, but I'm just bringing a bit of nuance in there. And so for me, when I stood on my podium, so to speak, when I received my graduation coin and all the things, and I was heading out to the unit, what I felt like at that time was an incredible amount of gratitude. And I know it sounds cheesy, but I did not see it as success. I'll tell you when success came into the equation is when I started looking back at the syllabus and I started going back in time and assigning a level of impossibility to the task that I, ended up accomplishing over the many years, including where I grew up, my upbringing, some of the stupid decisions I made as a youth, all of the things that could have easily derailed me from that mission. And I looked back at all of these factors, and then I looked at a very complex syllabus with all the benchmarks and all of the things that saw a bunch of good guys sent home on the daily, is where I understood that successfully negotiating a process is my measure of success. And I can apply that equation to almost anything I do in life. Anything I do that's meaningful to me is going to require a certain amount of investment in a process. for me to understand that I can negotiate very difficult process is probably the greatest measure of success that I've had as an individual. And using that knowledge is a dangerous tool. Confidence in one's capacity to, at the very least, be flexible and adapt to difficult circumstances teaches you something. And that something can be applied to absolutely everything in life. And so, aside from the factors that were external to me, some of the little things that I had a little bit of influence over were the things that I measured as success in that pursuit.
It's interesting. I really like this. As you guys were all talking, I was thinking about where I measured success, and it was an application of things. Whether or not it wasn't so much like when I got my CAP badge, it wasn't so much when I got to Afghanistan. It was after the fact, after finding my first IED, using the skills that I had been taught, using all the difficulty that I had been managed. Starting a podcast from scratch and then having really fantastic conversations leading to that next thing, utilizing the skill sets that I had previously. And so it's interesting because every time I've done something hard, every time I've done something challenging and completed that thing, I don't really feel like that completion is successful. It's until I have applied the knowledge from that hard thing to something else. That makes sense. Sean, I'm going to come back to you on this. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, that takes it perfectly in the direction that I was hoping to inject at some point in here, and that is the lost opportunity, the missed opportunity. And so anyone who is a combat veteran, as an example, that was a process put in front of you or that you were immersed in that is maybe peak learning opportunity, but only if you take the time to learn from it. And often I feel that certainly in conversations that that's hard to do when you're, elsewhere, when you're not able to just take a moment to introspect and reflect an appropriate amount of time, which may be days, by the way, rather than seconds, taking that time to learn from what you've just gone through. It doesn't happen often in a deployment. It's when you get back home, taking all of that valuable information, all of those valuable lessons, and integrating them internally and then externally into your life, which, by the way, is no easy task. And so all of this, let's call it what it is. It's a huge gift for you to either drop on the ground and stomp on, or for you to take the gift and unwrap and learn from. And so what I mean by stomping on it is simply taking the gift, dropping it, and walking forward as if you already know what the gift was. But you'll never understand the gift until you start deeply thinking about it over a long period of time. And again, that isn't seconds or minutes. So for you as an example, Chance, over in Afghanistan, you come back, you had loads of gifts inside of you that you probably didn't take the time to consider.
Not
in
at
fact,
all. Yeah.
I'll say probably is the wrong word. I know for a fact that you didn't, because we've had that conversation many times, off mic. And so that is the case with nearly anyone who is in extremely intense periods of their life. When they come out, that is the first time that they can really understand, what am I going to do with this gift? It's often not considered as a gift. It's actually kind of considered as a curse. But I'm proposing, in fact, I'm challenging to flip that script. It is a gift, but the gift has to be used well. And often, I believe, certainly from all of my observations, how to do that well is difficult, because most people, all of us, weren't taught that when we were young. And so the gift that you're given is yours to process over a period of time that is required to become a better person. How to do that? Well, maybe we'll crack into it in this podcast. Maybe it's too big for the podcast. I just think it's really important that I get that point across.
Absolutely. It reminds me of, this is silly. It's one of the things my parents used to do when we would get, every so often we get Ferrero Rochers and we have to take the wrapper off. And they made it into a game for us. And they said, if you could get the wrapper off and lay it flat, like purely flat, the tinfoil wrapper, then you could have a second one. And so we got really good at unwrapping them very, very meticulously. But to your point, that gift needs to be unwrapped. And that unwrapping process is not taught to anybody. So a lot of times, you see little kids and they just start ripping stuff off the sides. They're not really seeing what the gift is, or they're not seeing how to unwrap it cleanly. Nick, you got any thoughts on what Sean was dropping?
Yeah. I actually had this situation happen today. I've had it happen in the past before, but what Sean was talking about with the whole parameters around the idea of even something negative being a gift, I truly believe that, because just today, right before the podcast, I had a girl, I won't say any names or anything. She messaged me. It was like, hey, so-and-so in my family just got a diagnosis with cancer. He is going through it and he needs some direction and help and just an ear and another dude to talk to. And for me, I've had this happen in the past where other people have had that health issue arise and have reached out to me to hear how I dealt with it and the dark clouds that I encountered through that. And, while you're going through it, it's not a gift. It's awful. It's suffering. It's torture. Your mental space becomes very clouded, right? But now, through my own suffering, my own endeavors, I now can reflect back and I can give back to those that are going to be going through that in the future, to give them some sort of, whether it be just simply just having a conversation, or that daily work where you're checking in on them daily, because you understand that I wish someone was checking in on me daily. Right.
I'm digging that, man. Seb, you got anything?
I do. I'm going to go back to what you and Sean were talking about, because I think that skimming over integration is like probably it's very detrimental. And I don't mean that we as a group skimmed on it, but we inherently do, because there's so much to it. But it's important for people to understand that in any lessons learned, whether it's an actual lesson, a course, a skill set, whatever it is, there needs to be a sort of physical, mental, spiritual application of that skill or lesson learned in a different context of your life, all of which replicate the wheels to the pavement, because I think one of the issues is, and this would explain why you felt the way you felt, Chance, when you hit the ground and you actually were able to apply it in an operational context, because all of a sudden everything came full circle. You've taken all of those skills into this point where purely theoretical, even though there's physical activities involved, they were purely theoretical until you put them into application and they became something. When you do that, you really cement that. And this is the concept, and not to make this a big deal, but like that's the concept of the ecological approach in BJJ, for example. And I think there's certainly a place for it, and there is a place for the old school Hodger Gracie. This is how we do things. But I do believe that a mix of those two is probably the best combo, having some of these old school teachings, because you cannot discount the forefathers of anything that were going to bring so much value to the game, but also have the ability to understand that putting wheels to the pavement is really going to create the neural pathways that are going to help you go forward with the skills that you have acquired or developed, or that could be a lesson or anything. And so what Sean is talking about is really important. And him and I did that following the recording, the 10-day recording of the material that we were doing here. And we essentially were, smoked to begin with, but we also cognitively we were smoke checked, both of us. And it's a shame for me because he's much older than me. So I should have recovered earlier, but I didn't. but you know, we both took the amount of days necessary completely away from the project to make sure that we could calibrate against the realities of life until we were able to get back, and first of all to muster our cognitive abilities back, but also get back on there and use the skills and the moment acquired over the course of 10 days to be, you know, to be integrated essentially in the next phase of the process. And so there is a bit of an appeal of the gain here. You can, and you see this sometimes in people that will start something new, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I want to take 275 courses for this very specific thing, but they take the one course, then they jump into the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one, and there is value to this. I'm not discounting the fact. First of all, I'll give you a 10 for enthusiasm and drive, but also it's not necessarily the best way to do it from a holistic approach and for an integration approach. Definitely taking a little bit of time in between to integrate the skills into your reality so that they become your new reality, and then your baseline is elevated, and now you're moving on to the next course and you're doing exactly the same thing and over again. Assimilating and integrating those skills is going to yield a lot more results than front loading all this information that by the time you get to wheels to the pavement, you're going to have very little recollection of. And so I think that it is super important if something happens in life and there's a hard lesson learned, or there's some learning that's done in whatever context, whether it's life infused or you just took a course. There is incredible value in sitting with the information and starting to apply the information in a controlled fashion in a variety of different contexts to see what you get as a return out of that. And what it'll also allow you to do is to calibrate against different contexts, because some things might be very effective in a certain context and not necessarily universal. And that's important that you're able to decipher that, because if you try utilizing something and in a certain context it doesn't work and you start discounting it, you're going to miss out on every opportunity to learn there is in life, because there's a lot of things that are very specific in context and they may have great value, but if you are not willing to test them out in various contexts and you sort of discount them at the first opportunity when it doesn't work in a certain context on account of not having taken the time to do it properly, now you've just discounted something that could have brought an incredible amount of value to your life, but you discounted it because it didn't apply to a certain context. And there's a lot of analogy that could be made here too. You know, maybe there's somebody you have some differences with, but from time to time they say something brilliant, but because you don't like them, all of a sudden you discount everything they ever say. Well, you can't learn from that person. Whereas if you have a different mindset and you reframe it, you can actually learn from everybody you meet, whether you like them or not. And so there's a lot of crossovers with that little integration piece that is not to be discounted.
Integration is such a great topic. And we actually talked on Wednesday, Sean and I, a little bit about, velocity. And that velocity of integration is a really key aspect, because this is why we have immersion programs, right? Some people, that's what they succeed in. You just get dumped in the pool and they say swim and you're like, okay, I'll figure it out. Other people want to, toe drip or dunk their toe into the water and see if it's warm or not. And the ability to then integrate any of these lessons and it definitely will affect the outcome. That's for sure. And while I was thinking about this, it kind of clicked in my head of doing explosive work. You're talking about, there's a thing called velocity of detonation, and Seb, all about this, Sean, as well. But certain explosives detonate at certain speeds. So you use them in different aspects, use them for different things. You use them to do different things when you're talking about explosive work. And I think it applies in the concept of integration, because some things you need to integrate super fast, super hard right now. There's other things going on, throw it in the back of the trunk and let's go. And then there's other things that you can take your time on and really develop and try to work around and play with and add them to this thing and that thing and the other thing. And I just think it's a really interesting concept that we're playing around with. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
Sure. I don't mind playing with the explosives analogy because you can take an explosive charge and nudge a door,
Yep.
or you can take an explosive charge and remove the entire side of the house.
Yes.
And so what we're really talking about is the velocity or the kinetic energy velocity. And so that is an interesting topic within this paradigm of success, because the velocity of kinetic energy is not free. All energy has a cost. All kinetic has a cost. And so let's just use the shape charge or a charge as an example. When it's a bump charge or a slow charge, that kinetic energy pushes itself out at a certain velocity that isn't quite as sharp. And let's call those, I won't define it just now. Let me give the second example. A sharp kinetic, like a full wall explosion, that has an edge to it. How that kinetic wave moves out across the grid square, you'll feel that. And so a bump charge or a remove the wall charge are two completely different feels. So now, within your life, if you're just bumping things with enough kinetic energy that you're getting things done, that takes a certain type of charge and a certain type of cost. But if you want to move something fast and you want to move something a long way, that takes a much different kind of charge, a bigger charge, and a bigger cost. Again, nothing is free when it comes to energy. So looking at writing the book in Cardston as the example, as Seb said, he was smoked. We were smoked. I was so in the hurt locker at the end of that 10 days that I came back and I wasn't sure if my brain was ever going to be the same again. Like, I had nothing left. I don't even know how I got back to BC. And so it took a number of days for me to even start functioning normally again. And then it took me a number of days to start approaching peak performance again. And so all that time spent was an indicator to me of how much energy I had delivered in that moment, how much cost I had absorbed. And Chance, I believe, shortly after I came back from Alberta, we did a podcast, and I said, laughingly, I believe, I said, man, I lost like nearly 5 pounds out there in Cardston. It wasn't because I wasn't being fed well or wasn't being fed enough. It had nothing to do with that, because the food was amazing, et cetera, as I said. I was well looked after. I hadn't been looking after myself enough. I had loads of support around me, but I wasn't focused on, oh my goodness, my cerebral burn, my brain burn right now, the largest organ in my body at 25% of my caloric burn. I had dialed that up to, as I said to Seb earlier today, a 97 out of 10. This thing was on fire, man, and it was burning all the kinetic calories. And so anything that you're engaged in the sense of pursuing a successful moment, whether it's your life or 10 days or this minute, all of it has cost. And the more you pour into a moment, you've got to be aware that the more you engage, the more it costs you. But the payback is worth the cost as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. You can dabble all your life towards a dribbling approach towards success. And if you're not paying enough price, when you finally get to your vision of what you thought success was, you may not appreciate it quite as much because there wasn't enough burn rate, there wasn't enough cost, there wasn't enough, I've got nothing left in the tank for a few days. All of these things that we achieve in life should make you feel like the time was worth it, but also the time was hard, and that somehow the sweet spot of results and cost feel right to you. That is what I feel is success.
I really love that. And I remember when I showed up, you had a very Doc Brown look to you. Your hair was standing up on end, and like you guys were just fried. I think Seth came out for about 30 seconds, and he looked like he'd been awake for like 72 hours straight. And you guys were both pretty rough. But I loved seeing it because you could tell how hard you were working. Like it was obvious to anybody that could have showed up completely unaware of what you guys were doing and look at you and go, wow, these guys are working at 100%. Nick, you got any?
Actually, it is important that people see that. It's important that you saw that, because if you hadn't have got to see that stuff down in Cardston, not too many people get to see Seb and I that frazzled. Not too many. I mean, the people who have seen it are people that we've done hard things with, and they already know. But those people ain't like on the internet talking about it. And we're not like demonstrating how freaking bonkers cross-eyed we were during that period of time. So people don't really get to feel it or understand it like both you and Nick got to see it. Like that, I think it's important that you guys got to, or anyone who was there got to witness like how hard we were going, how committed we were to the moment, all of those moments. I think it's important that people see us suffer as we're trying to do our best, because that often doesn't get relayed well on the internet.
It's very hard to relay that because most people want to, when you go on the internet, I would imagine a lot of people want to see the successes, the idealed successes, right? Aha, we've achieved the book. Aha, we did the thing. We climbed the mountain. We friggin' won the race. We beat that other guy, whatever it is. They want to see that victory, but don't realize the amount of work. It's a perfect example, Nick. Like when you won a fight, how many people came up to you and was like, man, that fight camp must have been hard. Like no one talks about that. It's all about the win in the moment. What do you got? What do you got on what we're talking about?
Yeah, just as Sean was talking about that, I especially the internet aspect, I keep visualizing that that meme where it's a guy alone suffering on the left, and then it's like the next picture, it's a stadium full of people cheering for said person, and it's the quote is while you're doing the work versus the glory. Nobody's there to celebrate those little wins daily with you, or like to see you go through that process typically. And there's a reason they call fighting the loneliest sport in the world, because outside of, if you have like a person, like a partner or whatever at home witnessing it, even people at the gym, they see the suffering, they see the hard work, they see all those things. And those people, especially that are inside the gym daily with you, they see that level that you're putting yourself through, and they appreciate you. However, what people don't see is those things you're fighting at home as well, right? And sitting through the ice baths, doing your meditation, having enough discipline to follow your steps. And I think it's not with everyone, but I think one thing I've noticed a lot is people try to take shortcuts a lot, especially when it comes to I guess presenting that glory to people, especially online. There's lots of fake things nowadays, lots of fake people. But once you've done the work and you've lived it and you have experienced it, now you're not blind to who actually has done it. And you can see through the bullshit. You can see through the people that, I guess like simplify it in a way, where it's not simple. It's very, very, very complex. Yeah, they see a picture of my hand getting raised, but they have no idea. how long that 8 weeks was, especially the last few weeks when you're like, when it comes time to do a weight cut. Most people don't, especially in North America, have no idea what it feels like to be hungry, right? Like to actually be hungry. Like you're working, you're burning 4,000 calories a day, getting your shit kicked in every day at the gym, beaten, battered, bruised, and broken bones, whatever. And then you can't eat a burger after. It's like you got to come home and eat a piece of boiled chicken with a few nuts and go to bed. Like, it's like, at least I'm eating, but like they don't understand how much you're actually suffering inside your own skin, right? And that's where the mental stuff starts really playing in. But no, there's something to be said for sure, especially around the image of what glory actually entails, or success.
So let's dive into this a little bit then, because I want to talk from a little bit different of an angle on this same thing. I want to talk about teaching others. I want to coaching others through these moments, because we've been through moments of our personal successes, and we've been able to kind of learn through the school of hard knocks, which we've kind of already said that there's a benefit to it of learning through hard knocks. But Nick, you brought up earlier, being able to pass that knowledge on, being able to teach the next generation, to be able to coach new fighters or put new team members through selection, or, do the podcast and pass on information. How do we get that idea across without sounding, I don't know, like standing on the mountaintop, just being all like, "We'll just climb harder," right? How do we get this idea that the success is in the struggle versus in the moment? Seb, I'm going to hit you first.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a sensible conversation, right? That can happen, and that has to happen. It can happen. It has to happen, and it has to be done in a way that's, well, first of all, it has to be done by the right person. The person has to have a certain amount, the person has to have a certain amount of respect for what it is that comes out of the person. And the person has to have a certain amount of demonstrated abilities in relation to whatever it is that they're trying to kind of impose on others, so to speak. But then it becomes a question of, are you giving, and this always brings me back to the Greg Jackson of the world that are breaking down absolutely everything that's going on within the rounds and explaining to fighters how they need to angle more, and how they need to, every time you do a 1-2, he does X, and you need, and give it actionable items, as opposed to go in there and fight harder, do jiu-jitsu, coaching in a mat. It doesn't help. And so, doing something with and this is kind of like, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but when somebody doesn't speak your language and you say something, the next thing that happens is you say it louder. Like, I'm not sure how that helps at all, right?
Slower and louder.
So it's another one of those that humans, that we have a propensity to do, is our emotions sometimes will get the best out of us, and we will want to sort of impose the success prior to establishing what the roadmap to that success looks like. Mm-hmm. I really like, what the analogy that Nick was making earlier, and there's another one that goes around. It's the one with the iceberg tip, where you only see the iceberg tip, and then the work is under, like the iceberg base essentially is underwater, and that's the part that nobody knows about. But and it brings a question to bear. It allows us in humans to look at success from a sanitized view, which, if I look at it from a sanitized view, that means that I can accomplish whatever I want. I can be an astronaut, I can be this, I can be that, I can be all those things. And this is the message that sometimes gets skewed. Yeah, you can be whatever you want if you put in the work associated with whatever you want. It's not just the wanting the part piece. And so when you're seeing people being very appealed by the notion of success in its final iteration, as it were, it's often because it continues fueling the idea that they can be doing whatever they want, essentially giving them a dopamine hit in that context. But as soon as you start breaking down what fighters look like after a sparring session where their nose got broken, or they're bleeding, or they got a nasty cut, or whatever, now it brings something else to bear. It's all of this it's all of the sort of exemplification of the little things that can go wrong in that process. And this is how humans defeat themselves prior to even starting anything. And so it's no wonder that we're sort of gearing our cognitive input towards things that fuel the fire inside that makes us believe that we can do whatever we want, and we don't want to see the things that exemplify exactly the amount of work that we're going to have to put in to do it. Otherwise, we're going to start talking ourselves out of it, right? And so for me, it's a really interesting thing. When I at a certain point, as Nick alluded to, when somebody's in your field and they know what it takes to achieve certain level of success in whatever field, they understand the sacrifice associated with it. But more importantly, once you've done enough hard things, you start understanding other people's processes. You start, even though you don't know specifically, you're going to get curious about it. And instead of being threatened by it, you're going to be inquisitive and explorative. And when you start doing that, it opens up your possibilities in embarking on a different sort of, piece of your journey, so to speak.
I'm liking this. And I'm going to throw a line at you, and Sean, then I'm going to come to you with this, is that perhaps it's not that you can be whatever you want. It's that you can be whatever you will work for. What do you think, Sean? Coming right back to you.
So if the question is, as coaches or mentors or leaders or within our communities, how do we help someone approach this a little bit better, or how to see more success in their path? Generally speaking, that's the question. Yeah?
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so I'll give you two different Seans. The first Sean was Sean who had to learn how to be in adverse situations with the requirement of teamwork. And then the second Sean is one that had to learn how to operate in adversity all by himself without a team. And so, of course, the first Sean is in a team called JTF2 as the example. The second Sean is a 24-hour solo mountain bike racer, which, by the way, is quite a lonely sport because you're not hitting pads with anyone. All you're doing is hitting pedals for hours and hours and hours, headed nowhere. And so in the day, in the dark, in the rain, in the cold, in all of this stuff, every single day, outside in it, by yourself, no one to talk to at all other than your own head. And so I think that all of that, understanding how adversity in teams and adversity as an individual, all of that, I'm going to term relatable. So now using the word relatable in the conversation to answer your question, Chance. The more relatable you are, the more will be accomplished for the individual in front of you who wants some help, wants some guidance, wants a little bit of shaping, wants a little bit of a different look at things. So if someone approaches me as a coach, I am relatable across a broad spectrum of intensities from individual all the way through to team. Relatable is a word that is often used as he's easy to get along with. I always feel better when I'm around him. He's always smiling. He's relatable because he's friendly. That's not the way I'm using the word. Those things can happen, but they don't have to happen in order for the person who approaches me to do better in life, because my relatability is my experience or my lessons that I've learned or my wisdom through all of the boatload of mistakes that I've made. So I know how to do hard things in a team. I know how to do hard things as an individual. That has covered the entire spectrum, as it were, of relatability to hard things and hard successes. Now, whoever steps in front of me, I can have a conversation with them about it. Doesn't mean that I'll have everything figured out. It just means that I can relate to their question. They can relate to me as someone who will understand their question. And between the two of us, we'll figure it out. that kind of relatability is impossible if someone steps up and asks a question, how do I do it better, from a person who has no deep understanding of the question. Maybe they've got a college degree in coaching. Maybe they've got a college degree in academically how to do these moments well, but that doesn't make them relatable. That just makes them academically knowledgeable. And so the relatability in these moments to start driving instant successes is when two people can look each other in the eye and both nod at each other and understand that they're on the same understanding. They are in the same frequency. They are on, to some degree, an understood path. I hope that makes sense. I'm curious as to what you guys think.
Yeah, I'm tracking. Nick, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, and just in the sense of like coaching, right? One thing I, especially to my students that I like coach, I always reiterate to them, I'm like, if I see you don't want to be here, that is where I know you're not going to put in the work. As soon as I see you don't want to be in the room that day, I know everything that I teach you, everything I show you is going to go right out the window. You're not going to retain it. You have to want to learn. And I think, and it comes back to that whole like white belt mentality, right? You're always a student. And even as a coach, you're still a student. You're learning from your students, how they react, because the way I reacted at their age or even as an adult to certain situations is going to be different person to person. For me, what like a driving point I'm always trying to make with them is just show up and do the work. And I reiterate this a lot to them. I'm like, listen, I have bad days. There's days I don't even want to be in the gym, whether it be interpersonal life stuff or just life, or I'm battered or I'm just sore and I don't want to train. The ability to show up every day with consistency and to continuously look at developing, that is where, especially if you can create it at a young age in like teenagers or even youth, you're setting them up on a path, like a line that, like, as far as I'm concerned, I wish I had that line at 12, 13, 14 years old, right? It's all speculation, but I think it's very important to build that connection deeply, especially when it comes to transferring over knowledge, being relatable also. And, even students sometimes that I run into, whether it's a young person or an adult who wants to learn, let's say kickboxing or just MMA in general or jiu-jitsu, I tell them, I tell everyone, especially when I get like a personal client that like is doing personal training with me, I always tell everyone, I'm like, I'm at your beckoning call 24/7. I'm here to help you grow. And like, I don't care what I got going on the go. I will always help you. But you need to seek that information. You need to seek growth. If you're not willing to put in the time with me, I'm not going to be willing to put in the time with you. Like, it has to be a mutual understanding that this is the goal. This is what I want to feel. This is the success that I'm aiming at. And if you're not aligning, right? And sometimes, like, I've had this with lots of coaches where we had just, different perspectives, different ideologies, and it became contradicting it sometimes. But there is always something to be taken away, especially in that coach mentor relationship.
That relationship is a very special one, and I did not realize, and I mean, we've said this on the podcast a number of times, in that coaching here in Canada is not really it's not as big of a thing in a youth's life as it is in the States, right? The US have a lot of sports programs, a lot of time. So you're used to being coached on a pretty regular basis, whereas in Canada, it's not as prolific. And so I have a question. I want to kind of circle all the way back to the beginning here, but before I do you guys got any other thoughts that you want to jump in on? Seb, you got some?
Yeah, just quickly, I guess. Two things. First of all, again, great that we talk about coachability, because that's a conversation that's never being had or rarely has. And somehow it allows us to go into victimhood. Like it really does. It's like, well, the coach X or this coach I didn't like, and this thing and that thing and or the other thing. Tell me what you did. Tell me how you acted in relation to, say, the students that are benefiting from this coach. You know, why is it that you didn't? Is it a personal thing? Is it, but you need to be able to break that down so that you can optimize the learning version of yourself to the next endeavor that you're going to set your mind to, regardless of what the coach is about. Now, you know, I said this before on the podcast, but a wise woman once said to me, don't worry so much about how people tell you things, just listen to what they're saying. Because if you react all the time about how they're saying things, then you're missing an opportunity to learn a message, right? Perhaps. And so it's always good to weigh that in. And so I truly believe that is very important. And so when you're assessing a coach, what is something that, you know, rubs you the wrong way versus something that has no value? Those are completely at different odds. Now, inversely, coaches have to have the ability to adapt their personality. And this is a thing that I've seen lots of coaches struggle with, where they're always the same coach. And it's like, that's cool, but we know that isn't how people learn. So there is a variety of things that fundamentally are going to have to stay the same from a technical standpoint, perhaps, or from, you know, but you may have to really cater how you teach, what you say, what analogy you use, those types of things. So that's also something that coaches need to keep in mind. If anybody wants to coach, the best way to be, if you're coaching, especially individuals, and even in a group setting, you're going to have different ways to address different things. And this applies to leadership, and there's a variety of other things. So there are fundamental framework, but then there's also the little idiosyncrasies that you're going to have to be adapting to. And I forgot what you just asked there.
I didn't ask quite. I just wanted to see if there's anything else that you guys, because I have this question in my head and I want to hit on it. But before you got Sean,
we may not get to your point, Chance, because this may take us in a direction for quite a few minutes. So an additional layer to relatability is not just a one and doneer coach. So if Nick had only ever coached one athlete, and whatever the outcome of the athlete's abilities several years later, whatever that is, that's one thing. But if Coach Nick has had 1,000 successful fighters, now what we're talking about is a track record of excellence, or a track record of producing outcomes or results that are a pattern of excellence. And so there is a wild difference between a relatable coach who is a first timer and a relatable coach who is a 1,000 timer who has a freaking track record. So with that said, here's an interesting twist in the conversation. I feel that one of the biggest problems we have on social media right now is the relatability issue. There's many just starting out as coaches, or just starting out trying to make their mark on the world, young, not even young, perhaps even old individuals looking to transition into a new career or a new path, and they've decided they're going to start coaching people. And the way our modern world is set up right now, there's a lot of shortcuts for a person to be able to, even within a few days, start representing themselves as a coach with a certificate on the back wall, and start proclaiming that they're freaking in the game of taking you to the tip of the pyramid. It's easy to do nowadays. In fact, it's so easy that a lot of people are normalizing this aspect of instant success through an instant shortcut. But the best coaches that I've ever worked with, that I've ever learned from, through my own journey as a coach over the decades, what I've observed as the best result is the long grind, the relatability in the moment, that someone can understand that if they just hold the line or stay the course, in time, things will start to show up as successes for that individual. And those successes will be a number of successes, but they take time and they build on each other. But it is a process of not just a week or a month or a year. The great successes in relationships with coach athlete or coach individual or mentor person is the timeline easily demonstrates how it's done well if the timeline is years long. But that isn't the way that our modern social media world is being run right now. That's the twist in the conversation that I'd like to throw in, with the addendum of, Seb had brought up, there's different styles of coaching. And one of the slippery slope traps that a coach can fall into is just only having one way of doing things. And that way is Thor's hammer, and just beating on the team for years and years and years to create those amazing results, without ever taking into account the individual's mental health. And so the mental health aspect of creating successful people or great moments for people, and by people I mean me and the other person, there's the mental health aspect that also has to be slid in there as perhaps one of the primary concerns in a successful long-term program. What do you guys think?
I'm digging this, and I got a thought right off the bat, and it's something that I've seen you do, or you've talked about, and Seb has talked about as well. Is that as a coach, you two specifically, I'm going to use these examples. You're not selling a paradigm of success. You're selling. You're not really selling anything. You're just here to elevate the coachee's or the athlete or whatever, their idea of success. And I think, to your point, Sean, on the internet, what people are selling is a paradigm of success. It is, if you reach this, you'll be successful. Pay me my money. And I think that's the key difference in what an actual coach will do. Someone who is trying to get the best out of somebody, is that as a coach, I'm not going to tell my students, hey, you will be successful as a black belt. That's not my job. My job is to, what do you want out of this? And then help them achieve that. Whereas I think on the internet, what we see is people who are just constantly trying to sell someone else their idea of success versus seeing what that student or that client wants to begin with. That's where I'm going with it. Nick, what do you think?
I kind of think back to one idea coming to my head is when I look at certain, like especially from a coaching standpoint, when I look at certain, for instance, jiu-jitsu gyms, there's certain gyms that they base their belt system off of time or classes attended or whatever. And a lot of the time you see it, right? It's been proven over time. Everyone learns at a different rate, right? There's also attributing factors, right? Whether you're just naturally a gifted athlete, you're a clerk that's just coming to the gym to roll and, do something healthy for yourself. But one thing I just notice a lot, and even and these are good quality jiu-jitsu gyms, they're handing belts to people that, in my mind, you do not deserve that belt. I think I've seen lots of Coro belts talk about this. I shouldn't say lots because there's only a few in the world, but they talk about the blood, sweat, and tears that it took for them to get to these points. And lots of these coral belts, they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they have been doing this grind for 40, 50 years. And then, I feel like people just want that gratification to say, oh, I got to this point or this or this. But if you sandbag your way into like achieving that belt, and you just, you go to class, but you're not really trying, you're not really grinding, you're not really putting in that work, then is it actually an achievement, right? Like, and for me, like, especially with my students, one thing, so like, since I took over my teens program at my gym, or at my coach's gym, as soon as I was putting in 4 days a week with these kids, and I was giving them regimen, and I was giving them some sort of PT daily on top of learning martial arts, so they're obtaining discipline, not just like normal discipline. I'm giving them a little touch, just a touch of that military discipline, where it's the mind game of repetitive numbers, whatever it might be. And they start, you see, as soon as you do those little mind games, those little tricks, you see, like, they're going like, why is he doing that? And they start questioning, and then they start understanding. And most of them, as soon as they realize why I start repeating numbers, they realize because one person stopped doing the work. So you're stuck. Let's say you have to do 30 sit-ups. And every time I call 1, 2, 3, we get to 6. One kid doesn't do 6. Guess what? We're doing number 6 till that kid does number 6, and until we get to number 30. And I do this all the time with them, right? And it's not to create hostility to that student, but to give them that understanding that this is how it's going to work. We're a team, and we are all going to do the number, no matter what. And ever since I took over that program, we, like, almost every tournament my students are in, they're obtaining a gold or silver, or at least a bronze in every aspect, whether it's kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. And seeing regimented, disciplined young teenagers that like understand, that concept already, it's incredible.
I love this. You can cheat yourself, but you can't cheat the team. I like that. That's awesome. Seb, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this feeds right into what Sean was talking about, really, when it comes to wellness. Because what is Nick providing to these kids now is coping mechanisms for life. I mean, I can't think of a better gift that a coach can give the athletes. What Sean was talking about earlier, which is a conversation we're not having, is everybody wants to talk about wellness, but we have certain week we do it in, and it doesn't apply everywhere. It applies mostly at work, and it's generally the managers that are responsible for this. And we start siloing the concept of wellness, when really wellness is interconnected and really infused in absolutely everything we do. And so you can push yourself very, very hard. If you're attached to a strong purpose, wellness isn't going to be affected other than positively. But if you don't, then you're chasing your tail and you're being beat, then it has a different repercussion. And so I think that's a conversation that is needed to be had. I'll give you an example of this. I have a daughter who was a national level gymnast. She was very young and she was very good. She started on the bars when she was about 2 years old. I used to hang her off the bars, and she got really, really good. She was doing muscle ups by the time she was 5, right? But one of the things that happened is she was under the constant sort of pressure of Russian style coaches, right? And we know what happens to Russian gymnasts for the most part. They hit 22, they hit the pinnacle, their body is breaking down, their mind is breaking down, all of the things. And so imagine this. Imagine having a temporary state of affairs, like an obsession like this, like becoming an Olympian or doing something. And after that, you have a 60 to 70 years of life coming at you, and you are broken in so many ways. Just think about what it feels like. I sound like the Titanic when I get up, but it took me, to get in my 40s to feel like that, And so imagine if this happened now, but I was 18. What does life look like now, right? And so that's a conversation that we're not having. When Sean and I launched on this journey to write the book in 21, I remember a specific conversation that we had that I believe was a contributor to potentially dragging Sean out of his cave to share some of his wisdom. And it had to do with, the incredible divorce rates, the suicide rates, and all of the conversations that we've had in relation to some of the behaviors that were attached to the obsession of getting to a team or getting to a high performing any environment or any team or units. And I think that we both agreed that there are better ways to do that. You can achieve certain milestones, or you can achieve certain elevated benchmark and still maintain a level of mental wellness and physical wellness. Not everything has to be, stones to the walls, no holds back, and break everything, or sort of the application of brute force become the mechanism that pushes you through everything, right? There are better ways to do that. And I think that it is difficult, unless the person is receptive to this, it's difficult to teach that, and it's difficult to sort of establish the line in between the two. But there are ways to do that. And so one of the reasons why we launched on that book pursuit in 21 was exactly for that. Are there certain things that could yield excellent results that would sustain mental, emotional, and physical wellness for a lot longer? Because when it's all said and done, and I know there's some bodybuilders out there that are going to totally disagree with me, but when it's all said and done, what's happening to Ronnie Coleman isn't worth the titles that he got. And he can say that it does, and that's easy to say once you're in that position. But you haven't experienced the other side of this, which is having a healthy life and continuing to engage in the stuff that you love doing until you're 100 and doing all of these things. And so it becomes a question of intensity versus longevity and all this conversation. So philosophically, we're going to have differences, and I'm okay with that. But let's call a spade a spade. If you mean to tell me that almost any endeavor is worth your health, then it has to be extremely meaningful. And I mean life altering, right? You went out and you did something for the collective, and on account of what you did, there was an injury that was sustained or whatever. I'm in 100%. I understand that. I can stand behind that 100%. But you're going to be a sport athlete that's trying to go to the pinnacle of the sport and all of these things. What is this? What is the underlying fire of that? What is the underpinnings of that? Is that pride? Is that ego? Is that what fuels that? Because I'm gonna suggest to you that if you're willing to prioritize almost anything over your health, then there's a something that's requires to be looked into. What is actually fueling this? What is the meaning of this for you? Is it in relation to personal glory and all of those things? All of those things are not positive. They're not net positive. There's going to be a lot of positive coming out of that. But that in itself, living life with such pride, isn't a net positive at all. And so asking the questions and focusing as coaches on developing the mental capacity to sustain life through our coaching in the various medium that we use, whether it's MMA or mountain biking or whatever the case is a golden opportunity to affect somebody's life perpetually with the same tools, so to speak.
I love that. The we don't have time to get into that conversation because it is a deep one, but I wrote down holistic wellness, and we're going to have a conversation on that for sure. But it begs to mind, especially at a young age with athletes and stuff like this, and I'm just going to reiterate this thought, and then we can either do some final thoughts or we can play on it from there. But is that at a young age, we don't understand that our health is finite. And I think that's a key structure here, is because for myself, I got into a number of major injuries and accidents at a young age. I got hit by a car. Like I had some pretty bad things happen. It made me realize that my health was finite, first off, and that I was going to die at some point at a very young age. And I think a lot of people, especially in the Western world, they don't get that until they're later in their life. They have to go through that understanding, usually at that point. 18, 19, 22-year-old just came back from the Olympics. Their body is destroyed, and now they got to go get a job and they got to reintegrate into society, right? Like it's not an easy thing all of a sudden to get into. So I think, what do you got, Seb?
Just quickly, I realized I never finished the story about my daughter. So basically, she broke her back, is where I was going with this, right? And so she was very, very young, being put under the gun for the purpose of becoming as good as she could be on an unreasonable training volume. All of the things and all the red flags were there. And we've, a divorce that only has so much influence over other parties. And so she continued, and eventually it would lead to her having a broken back. And now I can barely take her on a hike for 20 minutes without her back acting up, right? And she is 19 years old.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the point I was trying to wrap up with this story, but I got tangential as I normally do.
Welcome to the collective. That's where we go with things. But it's such a great point, because that happens way more than the young star that goes to the Olympics and wins gold and then gets a prime job commentating for the Olympics, and then that happens so rarely that becomes the paradigm of success. That becomes, oh, well, I want to be Haley Wickenheiser. I want to be friggin' Wayne Gretzky. I want to be that pinnacle of success, without recognizing that your own success story is going to be your own success story. It's not going to be what we're seeing. So I just love that this conversation went the way it did. I mean, just want to say thank you guys, Seb, Nick, Sean, freaking awesome. This is a much larger conversation, and I know we could keep going, but I don't want to I don't want to spend all the people's time all day long. So I appreciate that we've all kind of come together very short notice. So we'll shut her down here. But I want to give this question as our final thought. After this conversation, has your concept of success, or has your paradigm of success shifted? And if so, how? And if not, why not? Let's start with Nick. What do you think?
I think my paradox has remained the same. However, I have a lot of different perceptions now, and a lot of different kind of ideas of what I would define certain moments as, right? The little moments more than the big ones. So as far as like the actual hand raise and just all the other ideas of what I believe are success, nope. I think my ideology around it remains pretty much the same.
Love it. Seb, what do you think?
Yeah, fundamentally no, but a lot of blind spots exposed. And I think that's the gift of coming on this platform all the time. It's you're not a presenter. You present at times, and then you learn the rest of the time. And this is what I believe makes this platform so incredibly powerful and evolving. Bring some different viewpoints from different people, different walks of life, different experiences, different thought processing, and then you start looking at life from different angles. And as you're doing that, you're able to reconcile some of the ideas that you had with some of the things that they're pathologically attached to, that needed to be discarded, and sort of grow different ideas. I love it. That was great.
Love it. Sean, what do you think?
Nothing has really changed for me. The paradigm of success, as I started the conversation off with, that hasn't changed at all. So the shell of the conversation, I'm still the same Sean and on this subject. However, as the boys have said, the construct that I've had for a long time is just simply being filled in some more. Just a few things that were said that make me think a little bit deeper, or make me think a little more laterally, just filling in little shadowed areas of my construct that I've developed over a long period of time on the paradigm of success. That's what this conversation did. And that's what these conversations always do for me. The real success of the show, of the podcast, irrespective of how many people listen to it, the real success for me is getting to spend time with people who make me question my ideas on success, and maybe not make me flippity flop in a split second, but actually draw me deeper down into my own understanding of what that means. So the the irony of discussing the paradigm of success is that this show reinforces my thoughts on how to be successful. It's just be in the right room with the right people, saying the right things at the right time throughout your day as much as possible. If you can experience that on a daily basis, congratulations, you're on the success train.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't have a whole lot to add. Again, you guys have all said it perfectly. The concept so far is the same for me, but all the nougaty goodness on the inside has been shuffled around. I got some thought process to go through and to just kind of realign everything, and it's just such a great conversation. So I just want to say thank you once again. This has been awesome. For those that haven't yet, make sure that you are liking and subscribing to the show, making sure you are signed up for the newsletter and all that good stuff so that you can all continue to learn, build, and grow alongside of us. We'll see you next week. Chimo.
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 Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see you all next time.